let's go ahead and get started. Been a little bit. So let's recap first internally what's going on inside the city of Rome. Let's recap politically what happened last time. So last time the big thing is the plebs. They got their three major laws passed. Remember what the three major laws are? One had to do with debt relief. So they got it set up so that everything that they had paid on their loan so far all went towards the principal. And then the plebs only had to make the rest of the payments in 3 annual payments to finish it off. The second law had to do with how much land one person could own. They put a cap on it of 500 acres of land per person. So you can't monopolize all the farmland sitting there around Rome. And then the third one, and the biggest one, and the one that they had to fight the hardest for, well, remember that one? The most important one?
Pleb had to be
yeah, one of your consuls now has to be a pleb. They got that. And so there were those 2 tribunes of the plebs who for 10 years straight were the tribunes of the plebs, and their whole time was just pushing forward those 3 laws, in particular, pleb consul law. So we saw our first plebeian consul, and he went and he did his plebeian consul thing. Military-wise, what's going on with Rome? Let's get to a map. So militarily, they've been largely just kind of trying to reassert themselves after the Gauls sacked Rome. The Gauls sacked Rome, everyone thought this is our time to rebel against Rome, and so they've been going out fighting against all sorts of different peoples. So we had them fight against Antium and Volsci a good amount of last time. We had them fighting against the Latins a good amount of last time. And then the one that we kind of ended with was the Hernici. The Hernici, they kind of bid their time, waiting for Rome to fight everyone else, and then they finally did their revolt against Rome. So Rome went, they fought against the Hernici. You remember the Hernici had their elite troops that they placed on the middle of the hill. They went all out for that fight. The Romans lost 1/4 of their army in that fight, so Romans have been taking some losses, subjugating all these people again, in particularly against the Hernici. They took some heavy losses. After that, the next year, Rome went back into Hernici territory after they'd been so weakened, and they took the biggest Hernici city, Ferentinum right here, and kind of reasserted control over Hernici. They're going to fight them a few more times from here on out, but it's going to be small conflicts compared to what they already did. So Hernici, largely back under Roman control. After they took Ferentinum on their way home, for whatever reason, their path came past the city of Tibur here. And they were going to resupply at Tibur, who's supposed to be one of their Latin allies. And at that point, Tibur said, no, and they closed their gates to him. Said, we're not letting you in. And Tibur, they had been doing a lot of things up to this point, kind of harassing Rome, until this was kind of the final straw for Rome. So they went home and they declared war against Tibur. And so the next year, when they were getting ready to go fight Tibur, they were shocked to discover a bunch of Gauls had showed up on their doorstep, just north of the Anio River. And it turns out that Tibur knew that the Gauls were coming, and they'd actually been in alliance with the Gauls. And the Tiburs were the ones supplying the Gauls, because the Gauls are so far away from home. And so we had one of our major battles, the Battle of the Anio River, is what it's called, right there at the bridge. Now, it's not because it was some big, great battle with lots of people dying on both sides. What happened was, they kind of scrimmaged for control of the bridge, and then the big bad Gaul came out and he challenged any Roman to single combat. It's kind of what the Gauls do in their own culture, to assert one over the other, and so very normal thing for a Gaul to do. And we remember who went and challenged the Gaul? Our careful thinker,
his name.
Titus Manlius, and now Torquatus. He'll have that last name Torquatus because he went, even though the Gaul that he beat was some high chieftain, he was decked out in all nice armor and stuff, he just went and took the necklace off of his body, and that's all he took as his prize. And somehow, the etymology of that word means somehow Torquatus is related to necklace, somehow. And so we see Titus Manlius Torquatus entering our story again. And he'll be here a few more times. So he's kind of our big name. So there's the big battles, there's the big name, there's the big political events. Trying to recap from last time. Any questions before we continue now with new material? Okay, so pressing forward, Rome now, still trying to subjugate everyone. So right now, they're currently at war with Tibur, the Hernici, and kind of the Gauls, but everyone's kind of at war with the Gauls. They're just raiding parties that come through taking what they want. So 360 BC, following year, Rome, they're going to send out 2 consular armies, one to go harass around Tiber and just raid the land, do what you can, see if you can get a decisive victory, and another one against the Hernici, even though the Hernici are kind of already beat. The consular army sent against the Hernici, he goes, he harasses the territory, wins some small skirmishes against them, gets them to send out an army, he defeats the army. So once again, Hernici taking another big hit. The army that was set up around Tiber, they go, they harass the Tiber lands, and now they're kind of just laying siege to Tiber, trying to take the city. Tiber, I may call it Tiber, so we don't confuse it with the Tiber River, but I think it should be called Tiber. Anyways, so one of our consular armies, they're over in Hernici land, fighting the Hernici, just making them pay for rebelling against Rome. The other one's up here around Tiber, fighting Tiber. Now remember what happened to the Gauls the previous year that got defeated here. They escaped, they went and they resupplied at Tiber, and then they went down into the Campania lands. Because Campania is like the richest place in Rome. Great place to go raiding. When the Gauls get word that their buddies are being attacked...
Is this place in Italy?
Yes. What did I say?
Rome.
Oh, sorry. Yes, richest place in Italy at this time. Campania. So when the Gauls get word that Tiber is being attacked, they come marching back up and they decide to march on Rome. They know that there's a consular army here, they know that there's a consular army here. Good chance for them to make a strike on Rome itself. And so that's what the Gauls decide to do. When the Gauls end up and they start getting close enough that they're actually raiding into Roman territories and the Romans realize that the Gauls are coming, what are the Romans going to do as they panic when they have their 2 armies already sent out?
They have an army in reserve, don't they?
Well, they're going to levy some more troops, but what they're going to do is they're going to appoint a dictator. And so they really quick have a dictator appointed, and he quickly levies a 3rd army to go out and fight them. And that 3rd army, it goes out and it fights the Gauls. And Livy reports that they fight so boldly, tenaciously, because they're so close, it's right outside the city of Rome. And so they very much have to feel like they're fighting for their lives, whereas the Gauls, they're just fighting for some plunder. And so once again, they beat the Gallic army, and then the Gauls, they move on, continuing the way that the Gauls continue, looking for new lands to plunder. Oh no, sorry. The Gauls, they defeat. When the Gauls get defeated here at Rome, where are they going to go to resupply?
How can they go to Tiber if it's being sieged?
Right, so they think, the Gauls, they think the Romans somehow have this army here. Maybe it's not the army at Tiber like we thought. And so the Gauls actually retreat to Tiber, but Tiber, there's a consular army besieging Tiber. And so the Gauls go rushing there, right into another army. And so that army actually causes the Gauls to take some heavy casualties this time. So they didn't lose very many last year in that fight. They just lost one guy and abandoned their camp and went on their merry way. This time they take some heavy casualties because they charged right into that consular army that was surrounding the city of Tiber. Now Tiber helped them by some people sailing out really quick to help fight the Romans and distract them enough that the Gauls could come in. But the Gauls still took some heavy losses, and Tiber even took some decent losses in trying to help the Gauls get into the city. So Gauls taking a pretty serious loss right there.
How is that possible? They got through the siege and into the city.
It's just going to be, you're going to dig a rampart around the city, and you're going to have some wooden stakes put up. And that's what you got. So,
And they broke through that.
yeah, you can break through it with enough people. But they lost a lot of people in the process. So, wasn't an easy thing for them to do. All right, so we got our following year. Tiber decides it's not smart to wait for Rome to come and attack us. We're going to bring the fight to Rome. And so they're about, I looked it up and now I can't remember. I want to say 14 miles away from Rome, but give or take a couple miles, something like that. They're like 14 miles away from Rome. What they decide to do is that they're going to launch a surprise attack all the way from their city clear to Rome so that they arrive at Rome in the night and attack Rome in the night. And so they're not going to take any heavy supplies, they're not going to be building any camps or anything like that. They're going to pack it very lightly and just charge on the city of Rome and attack the city of Rome. Now, from the Romans' perspective, they have no clue who's suddenly attacking them. This army shows up on your doorstep at night, and so they hurry up and they man the walls trying to defend the city. It's complete chaos and confusion internally for the Romans. They have no clue if this is the Etruscans coming, if this is the Latins coming, if this is the Gauls again somehow. No clue what's going on. But they're able to hold out, and there's nowhere that Tibur was able to actually break through the city walls and cause havoc inside the city. When daylight comes, they realize who it is, and they realize how small the army is that they're actually dealing with. And so you got the Roman city walls, wherever, Tibur, they're concentrated some attack on a particular part of the wall trying to break through. Come daylight, Rome sees that, oh, it's just that army, that's all they have, and they're all in that one location. They just send out 2 armies through either gate and do a little pincer attack on them, and just, again, cause them to suffer heavy losses, and they have to book it all the way back to the city of Tibur to get safety. So their little attack doesn't work. And Rome kind of lucked out when this attack came, because the months leading up to Tibur deciding to do this attack, they had their own internal conflicts going on between the patricians and the plebs. The patricians are still angry that plebs are becoming consuls, and the plebs are becoming more and more angry as time goes on about debt again. They're building up their debt once again, and basically starting to drown debt again. So Livy mentions that this unintentionally unified Rome, and they decided to put aside their differences for a little bit and focus on their external enemies for a while. So worked out nicely for Rome. Even better for Rome, they've been taking these heavy losses for the past few years. The Latins finally decide to rejoin the Latin League. So the Latins have been in rebellion to Rome this whole time. Now they decide, not all of them, but a bunch of them decide to rejoin the Latin League. As part of rejoining the Latin League, they're going to start supplying Rome with troops again, which Rome desperately needs. So Rome's going to have good manpower to call upon again. Now up north, Tarquinii, if we were to draw it, it's an Etruscan city, it'd be somewhere up like right there, maybe more like right here. They decide to send raiding parties down to plunder Rome's land north of the Tiber River. So Rome technically owns like all this land, if we were to fill in Roman territory, something like that. And since it's north of the Tiber River, it's hard for Rome to quickly defend it, and so that's great places for Etruscans to come and loot and get plundered. So that's what's going to be happening next year. So right here, so Tarquinii, people from the Tarquinian area, they decide to raid the land north of the Tiber River. And so Rome, in response to that, decide once again we need to levy 2 armies. We don't really need to worry about the guys from Tibur this time, because they just barely suffered their big defeat from us. And so 2 armies, one is going to go against the Tarquinii up north of the Tiber River, and then the other one down into the Hernici territory. Even though Hernici have largely been subdued, just keep kicking them while they're down until they're ready to surrender.
I don't understand how Tibur's army was able to leave, attack, come back while they were under siege.
They basically ran a marathon.
Well, I'm saying that they had to.
Oh, no, they weren't. Oh, sorry. They are not besieging year round.
So they stopped.
Right, so they stopped the siege and went back.
Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so once again, 2 consular armies raised. One's out there fighting against the Tarquinii, another one fighting against the Hernici. Now the Gauls, they show up again, invading near Praenesta. So that is right here. So the Gauls, somewhere in the hills over here, near Praenesta, that's where the Gauls are. You got one army up here, consular army fighting against Tarquinia, wherever they're going to be fighting in the Etruscan land. You have one army down here fighting in the Hernici land, and now the Gauls show up, and so we're going to have to worry about the Gauls here in Praenesta. So once again, got a 3rd army that we have to worry about. Now the Gauls showed up before the consular armies had actually left Rome, and so what they decide to do is they once again have a dictator appointed, and that dictator just selects the men he wants from either of the 2 armies to make his 3rd army, so they don't have to levy more troops. Those armies are now bigger than they've been in the past because now we've got the Latins to call upon again. And so that's sufficient. So they're going to have their 3 armies, and they're going to go fight in their 3 different places. Now, the consular army that's sent to go far up north against the Tarquinii, he somehow gets ambushed or something like that, loses a quick fight, 307 Romans are taken prisoner, and the Tarquinii decide to execute all of them, all the prisoners that they took. Old hatred against Rome going all the way back. So Rome is going to lose the battle up north, and on top of that, they lost 307 prisoners killed in a very terrible way that's just going to inflame Rome's anger. On the other hand, the army that was sent into the Hernici territory, he once again goes, he beats some small battles, gets them to send out an army, beats them decisively, and now Hernici are done. They say we give up. We're now back part of Rome. And so the Hernici are now resubjugated. And so we won't hear about the Hernici again for a while, if at all. I don't know. But definitely not for a little bit now. So that's now just Roman territory, just like any other Roman territory is Roman territory. So Hernici finally subdued. So those were the two consular armies. The dictator, he was the one leading the army against the Gauls. Now, the problem that he has leading his army against the Gauls is he's outmanned. And so he's on some sort of hill, and he builds his fort up on top of the hill, his Roman camp. The Gauls, they're encamped somewhere down here. So here's the Gauls with their big army. And he knows how the Gauls prepare for war. They don't. They just plunder and take what they need as they need it. And so he just wants to stay up in his camp, hold out against him. Since he's outnumbered, he doesn't want to take his army out there and risk a decisive defeat. They've got the supplies. They're going to be fine. These guys are getting hungrier and more desperate as more and more time goes by. He wants to wait till they start sending out raiding parties or whatever before he finally launches his attack. Plus, he knows that the Gauls are typically kind of restless, and so maybe they'll just be dumb and come attack us up the hill anyways. So it could work out for us. So that's his thinking. The problem he has is the soldiers under him are becoming more and more restless. They view it as kind of an insult that they're being forced to stay beside this camp when you have those Gauls out there. They want to go and they want to take the fight. And so more and more time, the resentment against the dictator keeps building up until it's getting to a boiling over point, and they're worried that the army's going to mutiny. One of the centurions comes to the general, comes to the dictator, and basically tells him, look, you know me by my reputation. I would never say this unless I thought it was absolutely dire, but you've got to attack now, or the army is going to mutiny against you. We're out of time. And so, general deciding that it's better to fight with an army than without an army, he decides that he's going to do the attack.
The Romans were more impatient than the Gauls.
Yes, this time the Romans were more impatient than the Gauls, shockingly.
Yeah.
And so, what he decides to do is, now there have been skirmishes going on back and forth between them, just trying to get advantages here and there. What he decides to do is gather up all the donkeys and cattle that he can in the area, and he puts all his wounded men on these animals. And he takes them with 100 cavalry. There's a hill back here behind the Gauls. In the night, with 100 cavalry over back here on the hill out of sight.
1,000 cavalry?
So it's 1,000 men on mules and cattle, whatever, with 1,000 of them with 100 real cavalry. So that's what he sends back there. And the next day, the Romans come out and they line up, and now they're going to give fight to the Gauls. And they go and they start fighting against the Gauls. And the Romans, after a while, they start losing because they're outnumbered. The left wing in particular is about to give way. The dictator has to personally charge in there with his men and hold up the left wing, and that's when he finally gives the order for these guys to charge. These guys come charging down the hill. Now, injured men on donkeys and cattle aren't going to do anything. But in front of those 1,000, he puts 100 actual real cavalry. And so from a distance, it looks like a massive cavalry strike is coming at you. The guys you can see in the front are the actual cavalry, and then you can see tons of people behind them. There's dust coming up and all the things. It looks like a full cavalry charge. And so when the 100 hit the Gauls from the back and they see all the other army coming with them, they panic and they scatter. And so he's able to win that decisive victory. As the Gauls scatter, able to use their cavalry to then start chasing down the Gauls and get a massive win on the Gauls. Gauls take a massive hit. So, yes. Okay, covered all those. Any questions about any of those wars? Okay, so kind of splitting this up, giving you the wars, and then giving you what's going on internally in Rome. So here's what's going on at Rome in the meantime. At Rome in the meantime, one of the things that happened is Rome adds 2 new tribes, so now there's 27 tribes at Rome. These tribes are how you do your voting. When you do your voting by tribe, each tribe gets 1 vote. And so each person, each Roman citizen, is a part of some tribe. And so they've got some population migrating into Rome, largely from their conquest. I think this happened after the Hernici are now subjugated. But they also got Ferentum, the main Hernici city, prior to that. So it could have been after that happened that this happens. But people coming into Rome. So Rome's population is being restored through these conquests. On top of that, they finally pass a law that you can't bribe someone to vote for you. You can't pay someone to vote for you. That is now against the rules. That's cheating. So that is now officially illegal in Rome. Well, I mean, it's your money. You can do with it what you want. Why should it be illegal to pay someone if they want to give you their vote? Anyways, so that law gets passed. Next thing that happens is, once again, since debt is obviously becoming a problem again, this having debt capped at 100% interest rate on loans, that's not working out too well. So they set a new max that you can charge on a loan is now 12%. So people will now be charging a lot as 12% on their loans rather than 100% on their loans, trying to address the debt issue. So that's the new law. And then finally, very strangely, one of the consuls, when he's out fighting in a war, he gets his soldiers together. Remember that when you do your vote, you do your vote by century. It's your military that votes to pass laws. And so he passes a law way outside the city of Rome. He just gets his army together, he suggests the legislation, and they vote on the legislation, and they pass the legislation. And so a law is passed outside of Rome that a 5% tax is going to be charged on manumission being the freeing of slaves. So a very normal thing at this time would be you get a slave. A very normal thing at the time would also be you free the slave. Try and take you through some typical pleb. You know, I got my farmland, I maybe own one slave. It's going to be me and that slave out there working in the field all day long. He's going to become like my best friend. And so it's a very normal thing that manumission occurs and slaves are freed. So the law is that you have to pay basically a 5% sales tax for freeing your own slave. And it turns out that this tax starts bringing tons of money into the Roman treasury. Go ahead.
What are you paying 5% on?
The value of the slave that you're freeing. So if it's determined that that slave is worth 1,000 asses, then you have to pay 50 asses to Rome to free your slave.
What other things are they taxing for the most part?
I have no idea. Largely your tax at this point has been, there's actually a particular building project, and so we're going to collect tribute from the people based off of whatever your wealth sits at. And then your other being taxed is military service. And that's largely what the tax is at the time. Tribute for specific things, and then serving in the military. So having standardized, we're going to have this kind of tax is not a normal thing.
Yeah, it's a weird first tax.
So anyways, when he gets back to Rome, and this law is now presented as, this is now a law, guys, this is what we're going to do. A bunch of money comes flowing into the treasury. Everyone agrees that this law is a very good idea. And so it's a very popular law. But everyone is very disturbed that some consul out with his army just decided to present this legislation to him and get the vote done. They don't like that happening anymore. So another law is then passed saying you can't do that anymore. So laws cannot be passed outside of Rome. Well, laws are always passed outside of Rome. They do it on the campus martius, but they can't be passed a distance from Rome. And I don't know what the technical terms are. What the exact law is it's a capital offense to summon an assembly a distance from the city for the purposes of voting. And whatever that distance is whatever the distance is. So they love the law, they're not going to repeal the law, but they don't want any consul ever just going out and passing laws like this again. So get that law passed. And then finally, kind of a funny incident. Caius Licinius Stolo, we remember him at all? We remember the daughter of the patrician who was stuck with the pleb husband. That's her pleb husband. Okay. And he was one of the two tribunes of the plebs that kept pushing to get the laws passed. So those three laws were called the Lex Licinia Sextia. That Licinia comes from this Licinius. Anyways, he ends up paying a fine of 10,000 asses for owning more than 1,000 acres of land, which is illegal by the very law that he went so hard to push. And it was seen as somehow that was being a little bit harsh with how they fined him or something like that. And the reason they were a little bit harsh, or that was seen as a little bit harsh, and the reason they were a little bit harsh with him is because he tried evading the law by emancipating one of his sons and giving him 500 acres of land. Remember, you're part of your father's household until he dies. Emancipating your son is a very strange thing to do. You don't normally do that. And so this was just another way that someone could get around the law is, oh, I have 1,000 lands. Well, this son, you now get 500, and you're no longer part of my family. Oh, got another 1,000. Well, you, son, that's technically your land. And you can start breaking it up like that to get around the law. So he passed the law, he broke the law. And he was fined for breaking the law.
So they would bring something like that to the courts and the judges, and they would just interpret that he found a loophole that they didn't agree with.
Yeah. There isn't, well, technically by the letter of the law, this is okay. It's very much a spirit of the law kind of thing going on here. And you know what you did was wrong.
Yeah.
And you know how you were cheating. And if you decide to appeal it, then it goes to the assembly of the people, and they decide whether or not you're innocent or guilty.
It's incredibly ironic that the very guy who pushed that law is...
Yeah, so he must have been doing well after being such an important tribune of the plebs.
Well, it seems
Good
to be
life.
working to put plebs up there. These laws
Yeah.
are making a lot of sense.
Plebs rising up in the world. Okay, so now continuing with more wars. So the Gauls, they're pretty much beaten for a while. Won't have to worry about them for a bit. Tiber's been pretty well beaten. The Hernici have been pretty well beaten. The Latins just rejoined the Latin League. Things are looking pretty good around Rome. The only real problem right now is to the north. The Etruscans, that's all they have to worry about. So 357, once again, two consular armies are going to be raised. One of them just sent to Tiber to harass Tiber, and once again, make sure that they're not going to be able to attack us. No big deal what's going on there. The second army, on the other hand, is being raised to deal with the Etruscan threat. Because not only have they been at war with Tarquinii this whole time, wherever it is, somewhere right there, but the Felici, their main city being Flarii, we've had them fight us a couple times in the past, they decide to join the Tarquinii in this conflict. And so now some Etruscans are starting to unite together against the Romans. And so the second consular army is going to be sent up to fight against them. Now that consular army, wherever they fight, I don't know where they fight, right there. These guys bring down their armies, so they got their armies right there. What the Etruscans do, the Tarquinii and the Felici decide to do is, go ahead.
I was wondering if Flarii is one of those big cities like they was of the Etruscans.
I don't know if that is one of the 12 Etruscan cities. I initially said no, and I remember when I said that. And then when I saw that, or when I came here, I was going to check that, and I completely forgot to do that. So I don't know.
Is Tarquinii?
Tarquinii for sure. Tarquinii, but yeah, Tarquinii. The Tarquinii being the people from Tarquinia. Tarquinia is the city. Tarquinii, the people around that area. Okay, so anyways, they're united together. They're now going to come down, and they're fighting the Romans. They decide to use some trickery that they use in some of their more religious festivals in fighting the Romans. And so what they do is they get a bunch of fire and put on a display while wearing a bunch of costumes and disguises, and they have some fake things that look like real snakes that they're fighting with, and they show up to go fight the Romans dressed that way. And the Romans see all this weirdness and said that it felt like they were dealing with a bunch of weird Etruscan priestcraft, didn't dare fight, and the army fled and ran back to their camp before a fight even occurred. Now, the leaders of the Roman army, they say, what are you doing? They're wearing costumes. They're holding up torches. These are not scary things. You're big boys. Get out there and face your fears. And the army actually has a pretty good humor about it. They can't believe that they allowed themselves to be scared this way. And so they're all making fun of each other. I saw the way you were running, and I just had to run because you were running. I wasn't really scared. And so they go back out there, and the Etruscans, seeing how they fled the first time, kind of underestimate them, and the Romans just have their way with them, and it's an easy victory for the Romans. And they get their camp and have a good time. So that's 357 BC. These determined Etruscans decide that they're going to fight them again the following year. A bunch of Etruscans, now I don't know which Etruscans it is. Levy just says the Etruscans united. I doubt that's all the way up north. But a bunch of Etruscans are now uniting, thinking that they've got to now finally put on a unified front against these Romans that are growing. And so, Rome now, thinking that they're going to be facing the might of all of Etruria, they decide they're going to have to appoint a dictator to deal with this army. And so, Caius Marcius Rutilius is appointed dictator. And he is a pleb. So for the first time, we have a pleb dictator. Now, for a pleb to become dictator, not only did he have to be nominated by a consul, which could have easily been a plebeian consul offering him up, but the Senate had to agree to it. The Senate has to ratify your choice of dictator, and so the Senate agreed to this guy, an actual pleb. Now, what makes the Senate and all the patricians very angry is he instantly turned around and he appointed a pleb a master of the horse. So, in context, it was kind of understood that he was supposed to appoint a patrician a master of the horse, and he instead appointed a pleb a master of the horse. So now the two highest positions in the state are currently being held by a bunch of plebs. The Etruscans, they unified together in an army and they marched down on Rome, but once they got to Roman territory, they just can't help themselves and they turn into more of raiders than they do organized armies. And so they set up their camp somewhere close to Ostia. Ostia is going to be like right here, Ostia. So right here, just north of the Tiber River, that's where they actually set up their camp. And now the armies start going plundering throughout the Roman area. Now, once a pleb was appointed master of the horse, at this point the patricians are kind of hoping that their army fails. They don't want this dictator to have success. They want this to be an embarrassment for the plebs and a justification to never have a pleb be a dictator again. Unfortunately for those patricians, this is a very good general. And so he takes his Roman army, and first thing he has them do is just build a ton of rafts. And he uses those rafts to quickly navigate his army back and forth across the Tiber, trying to confuse any reports about where the Roman army is. Because they shouldn't be able to just teleport across the river when there's no bridges here. And on top of that, he's able to keep scouts on this side, and anytime there's a raiding party, because the Etruscans had scattered throughout the area, raiding any Roman stuff that they can, he's able to quickly take out the raiding party and not really give them a chance to report back to the main Etruscan army what's going on. And so he has just a ton of success working his way down the Tiber River until he's able to surprise the Etruscan camp altogether, where their main camp was. He easily beats off the people that are in the camp. They scatter back up north, and inside the camp, he was able to capture actually 8,000 Etruscans there. So, this was a massive victory for the Romans. Huge victory against all the Etruscans. Even though they didn't kill a bunch of Etruscans, they killed enough of them and captured a good amount and scattered them back up through the north of Rome. Now, the Senate, they're very annoyed that he was so successful and he had such a great victory. When he comes back to Rome, the Senate refuses to give him a triumph. But the people demand that he has a triumph. And so they have a triumph anyways, even though the Senate says no. And this is only the second time in history that a triumph has been celebrated against the will of the Senate. I can't remember the first guy that did it. Might have been the first pleb consul or the second pleb consul. Someone like that.
If the Etruscans are, bored enough to start fighting Rome, even though they haven't really had a beef with them, it sounds like the Gauls are literally going around the Etruscans to.
Yeah, I have no clue what negotiations the Gauls have with any of the other northern tribes. And remember that the Gauls themselves aren't particularly organized. There isn't, here, we're the Gauls. The Gauls is our name for a collection of a bunch of tribes that all share a common culture. There's a bunch of internal fighting between the Gauls themselves. And there's often times where a bunch of Gaul tribes decide to organize together into some confederate thing for a particular army, but when that's done and over, that's done and over. And now it's on to the next thing. And so they are extremely unorganized themselves, and they are extremely spread out themselves. So, okay.
Flarii is one of the 12 Etruscan cities.
Okay, Flarii is one of the 12. So that would be very disturbing to the Etruscans that now 2 Etruscan cities, 2 of the 12, can't hold off against the Romans. It wasn't that long ago that 1 was a match for the Romans. And now 2, and Rome's just slapping them around like they're nothing. And so now the organized army coming down and being humiliated this way, Etruscans are not going to be comfortable having those neighbors to the south. But also remember that the Etruscans themselves are not in any way really that united. They are very loosely united and rarely come together to do anything. And it's largely just recognizing their shared culture. They're kind of like the Gauls, except for they have big, rich, urban cities. They just don't work together very well. But they also don't really fight with each other. Everyone just kind of does their own thing. Okay. Anything else? So there's the wars. Back to politics. So, Senate, they're furious. He was supposed to appoint a patrician master of the horse, the dictator. He didn't. He was supposed to not be so darn successful. He was. He was supposed to not have a triumph. He did. And so they decide that they're going to put off the elections of the next consuls until he leaves office. So he has no effect, no say in how that goes. And when he leaves office, then they start cycling through a bunch of interrexes to hold the elections. Now, an interrex, that's the same thing that you had going all the way back to the kings. When a king died, you appointed an interrex to hold the office for a little bit until the next king could be found. And I can't remember how long they get the office. It's like 7 days, and it goes to the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy. So it just cycles through a bunch of people until it can happen. It's oftentimes when they can't get an election done that it goes to an interrex to oversee the elections. So cycling through a bunch of interrexes, which makes it sound like there's a bunch of elections going on that the patricians are for some reason calling invalid, vetoing, saying that the signs aren't good or something like that. Hints at that, doesn't say that. Now, eventually, 2 patrician consuls are elected. Both patricians. Which is what the patricians wanted and were pushing for this entire time, and the whole reason that they didn't want a dictator in office. They don't like the plebs grabbing power like this, and so they're going to abuse the system, and now they're going to grab the power. And the plebs are furious about this. Well, in particular, the tribunes of the plebs, the ones that represent the plebs, are furious about this. They say, you cannot do that. We have it written as a law that one of the consuls has to be a pleb. And the patricians say that's true. Can't argue with you there. But it is also a law. Give you exactly what it is. It was a law in the 12 tables that whatever the people ordered last should be law and enforced. And the suffrage of the people were their orders. In other words, if the people passed a law that interest rate should be 50% on loans, and then 10 years later they pass a law that interest rate should be 10% on loans, you go with the later law. That's essentially what this is saying. You always go with what the people voted last. Now, the same assembly that does elections is the same assembly that does laws. And so, in a way, it's like every time you do an election, you're saying it's the law this year that they're in charge. And since the assembly voted 2 patricians to be in power, that takes precedence over any past law that says 2 patricians can't be in power. You can't overwrite the current will of the people, and what they vote is what they get. That's the logic that the patricians are using here. Now, this breaks all election laws, because then you can just vote for whatever you want, and who cares? It's the last thing that they voted for. But that's the way they argue it. They're the ones in power. What are you plebs going to do about it? Apparently not much. So they whine, they complain, they're very angry about it, but the impression you get is that the plebs very much a black pill on life. Say, what's the point of even trying? And so the following year, 2 patricians are again elected, and the reason that they're elected so easily is that the elections were so poorly tended. So the plebs decided it wasn't worth it for a year. So, black pill a little bit. Should have never black pill.
Do they just feel like their say doesn't have
Right.
meaning?
Like, there's no point in even trying. They're just going to cheat and take it anyways. Along those lines. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Now, wars are still being continued against Tibur and against Tarquinia, the Tarquinii, people from Tarquinia, the following year. Finally, after they go and they beat Tibur one more time, Tibur decides, we're going to surrender. We've been getting kicked around for, I think, about 5 years now. No point doing this fight. So they surrender to Rome. Now they're back under Roman control. And the army that goes up into Tarquinia, they, once again, they go and harass around the Tarquinian lands. They get an army to eventually come out. They win a decisive victory against them, and they capture a bunch of their men. They get 358 high-ranking officers. And they take those 358 high-ranking officers, and they march them back to Rome, and they kill them all. You got 307, we got 358. So they get their revenge for what the Tarquinians did to their soldiers, except for they made sure all the guys that they got were high-ranking people, not just regular soldiers. Ones who might have been responsible for making that decision. And back internally in Rome, once again, plebs are drowning in debt. Even though they did that reform, where they lowered interest rates legally to 12%, there were still people who got out their loans when people could charge 100% interest rates. And so there was plenty of time for whatever debt there was to accumulate and the plebs to once again be drowning in debt. And so, because of that, Livy says, is one of the reasons that they're becoming more and more distracted from politics. They're less worried about public matters and more worried about their own private matters and how they're going to deal with their private debt problems. And so, again, for the third year in a row, both consuls elected are patricians. So, patricians for 3 years in a row for all the consuls. Any questions there? Following year, 354 BC, or the one that we just started with the two patrician plebs coming, or the two patrician consuls coming to power, Rome enters into a treaty with the Samnites. Now, the Samnites, this is going to be the important player going forward. They're going to be like the Volsci have been for the last while. So the Samnites, they're right here. Rome, they're right here. Sorry, not a very good map and has that watermark on it. Volsci territory right here. Pernici land, that should now be red. That's under Roman control. The pink here, that's Latins, are under Roman control. So Samnite and Rome, they are both rising powers in Italy. They decide that they should have an alliance between them. We don't know the details of what exactly this alliance was. It was most likely just a non-aggression pact. No one's going to attack the other person. But it's also speculated that part of it was they were both going to be aggressive against the Volsci and both attack the Volsci. In either case, it's pretty safe to assume that from here on out, the Volsci are having to deal with the Samnites over there. So they're going to be being attacked on two fronts, as the Romans attack them as well. So, treaty with the Samnites there in 354 BC. 353 BC, Rome gets word that the Volsci are organizing a nice big army. On top of that, some Etruscans decide to come down and raid into the Roman territory once again. And most devastating to the Romans is Caere decides to join in that raiding party. So they come down, they're raiding around Ostia, they're on the Tiber River, some Etruscans coming down, and Caere decides to participate in that raiding. Now, the city of Caere, that was like one of the two Etruscan cities that Rome had good relations with. You had Clusium going back to Porsenna, and they largely helped in times that Rome was starving. And then Caere, they were the one that took care of Rome's religious artifacts when they were getting sacked by Rome. And so they've always been a good friend to Rome. Rome's always been on good terms with them. So them participating in the raiding party, that shocks the Romans.
Is it because they killed their friends?
We'll see. But anyways, so Rome being raided from the north, there's word that the Volsci are creating this big army in the south. It's time to appoint a dictator. This time, the dictator decided to give you his name since it's one you know. He's our careful thinker. He's our Titus Manlius Torquatus. So he's appointed dictator. And he instantly, when they get word of this, declares war on Caere. On top of that, the Volsci, raising their army, probably dealing with the Samnites. We don't know for sure what's going on with them. But whatever this Volsci army is, it never materializes to attack Rome. And so he takes this whole army and says, we're going to give Tarquinii a break here, and we're just going to focus on Caere, and we're going to go show them what happens when you betray Rome. So he takes the full might of the Roman army, he crosses the Tiber River, he goes marching on Caere. And Caere, when they realize they got Rome coming after him, and fully armed Rome, they pull a Tusculum. Say, we're not going to fight, we're sorry. You know, when little brother hits big brother, sorry, didn't mean to. And they say, we never even wanted to participate in the raiding. When the Tarquinians were coming through, they forced us under threat to participate, but we know that's no excuse. We never should have done it, and we're very, very sorry. We promise to never do it again. And remember when you were in trouble with those Gauls and all those nice things we did for you? So you kind of owe us one, don't you? And the Romans say, yeah, we kind of owe you one. And so they say, yep, everything's forgiven. We're not going to retaliate in any way. We're going to go ahead and give you a 100-year treaty that we're going to enter into with you guys. And since they took the time to put this big army together to go deal with Caere, and turns out there's not going to be a fight there, they decide may as well go north and do some raiding. So they go north and they do some raiding, in particularly around Tarquinii and Falerii, and just devastate their land, so it's harder for them to launch a counterattack against Rome in the future. So that's what happens 353. Now, back inside Rome. So Titus, he was appointed the dictator. He goes, does his dictator things, comes back to Rome, and then he resigns. Once he resigns his office, from there on out, the tribune of the plebs, they're now getting angry because it's been 3 years in a row that we've had just patrician consuls. They decide that they're going to go back to blocking elections, just like they did in the past. It's like, you can't appoint any more consuls, and we're just going to go without consuls for a while. And so they keep blocking elections over and over again, and eventually the patricians agree that we'll go back and we will have a pleb and a patrician elected. So they get the patricians to make that concession. The tribunes allow the elections to go forward. So once again, a pleb is elected. On top of that, they still have to deal with this debt problem. It's getting out of hand. Even the patricians are getting really worried about this because it's always when debt gets out of hand that the patricians go nuts swinging for, we need debt reform and we need power, power, power. They don't want that scenario to come up again. They want to deal with this before the patricians come asking for, or before the plebs come asking for more power some way. So what they decide that they're going to do is appoint 5 commissioners, and your job is to figure out and resolve this debt issue. That's it. Just fix the debt issue. That's all we need you to do real quick. And so what are they going to do? Here's the plan that they come up with. They decide that the state of Rome is going to buy out all the loans that the plebs owe to their creditors. So if a pleb still owed you $100,000, me, the state, I may give you that $100,000, and now the pleb owes me. And they're going to make the payments to me rather than to you. And me, as a state, I'm not going to charge them any interest. So now they don't have to worry about trying to get out from underneath the interest. They just now need to finish paying off whatever the principal is. So no more interest being charged. That way the creditors don't get cheated out of their money, because that's what the patricians are going to hate. And the state is now taking over the payment. Now, what's the state going to do if they can't make the payment? It's basically put them into bankruptcy. We're going to take your physical property and sell that off until we can recover the money that we can. And if it comes to a point where we can't even recover our money from you, then we can't recover our money from you. So the other reason that the state is taking over it is so that you're basically not becoming a slave to someone else because you can't make the payment. So the state promises not to enslave you. If the state takes everything from you and you're left with nothing, we're going to leave it at that, and you're starting from nothing once again. So kind of like bankruptcy.
The debt seems somewhat atrocious, isn't it? Considering the 100% interest rate over year after year after year, it sounds like it would be like just out of this world at this point.
Right. So some of them going to owe out of this world sums.
And this state.
So right. So now the state is going to pay for it, and the patricians are kind of unhappy about this. Now you might say, why are you unhappy? You're going to get paid what you're owed. But know how the state doesn't just have money. How does the state get money? Taxes. And in Rome, the more wealth you have, the more you're taxed. That's how their wealth system is set up. A poor pleb who hardly has anything, I can't remember what the cutoff is, if your net worth is under like 10,000 asses or something like that, you're not even taxed. And so, it's like, the state's going to pay all you guys that we owe the loans to, but we essentially have to tax you to pay it. And so it's going to be like taxing everyone to pay the few who really were owed a lot. So, all the patricians are not really happy about this solution, but they don't really know a better solution. And they kind of all end up agreeing, yeah, it's kind of the best thing we can hope to get out of this scenario. So that's what they end up agreeing to do. And even though they all grumble about, they decide that those 5 guys who came up with this, that was actually a pretty good plan. Their names are remembered and they're kind of famous. So that deals with the debt issue for there. Now, back in Rome, rumors of Etruscan armies getting ready to retaliate leads Rome to once again appoint a dictator. Now that Etruscan army never materializes. The dictator decides to take the army, go pillage some lands, come back. Nothing happens. Couldn't get the army to come out in some way. So it was almost like there was no Etruscan army. Now what the dictator does though is he stays in power. He doesn't instantly resign, and he stays in power through the election season. And he makes sure that it's 2 patricians elected consuls again. So now we got 2 patricians consul once more. The plebs decide to kind of let this slide. They're still happy about the debt relief. They feel like this isn't something really worth fighting for at this time. So they don't really push back on it and say, okay, we got 2 patricians this year. But what is desperately needed now is new censors. Remember, your censors are the ones responsible for figuring out how much wealth everybody has, because then that determines how much taxes you have to pay. If you suddenly lost a ton of money, you need the censor to know, because you can't keep up with whatever the taxes were going to be. In particular, if you gained a ton of money, Rome wants to know, because they want to get their money from you. And so, Caius Marcius Rutilius, whatever, this was the same guy that was our first dictator. He actually runs for the office of censor, and he wins it. And he becomes the first censor, that's a pleb, in 351 BC. And with him doing that, it's hinted that this is somehow connected to the following year, both the patrician and pleb are being elected consuls. So somehow him being in that position of power, he's able to help negotiate things in such a way that this ends up being a consequence of it. The details of that, I don't know, but that's the way it's being presented. So finally back to patrician and a pleb being consuls. Now the Gauls, once again, they decide to invade up here in the Alban Hills. Not sure where they came from, but that's where they're found, in the Alban Hills. Good place to raid from. Stay up in the hills and then raid out in the surrounding areas. Hills easy to defend. The patrician consul is ill. And so the Senate has to assign the war to the plebeian consul. Again, they never like to do this if they can avoid it. They don't want a pleb winning glory. They want it to be the patrician winning glory. And so the pleb, he's the one that's going to go out leading this attack. Now, the place that he's at, somehow up, there's like mountains over here, some valley here, and then some hill. He, once again, goes and he builds his fortifications up on the hill. The Gauls, they're somewhere down here. Once again, he has the problem that the Gauls coming in are bigger than the army that he has right there to fight him, so he doesn't want to just go out and fight him. Now, as he's building his fortifications, the Gauls decide to just charge him and come attack. And they're up a pretty steep hill. And so the Romans, seeing that they're coming to attack, they all line up with a small portion of the army just continuing to build the fortifications in case they need to fall back. But they're just planning to hold out against them. The Gauls, they charge up the hill, and they just burst it up it, sprinting as fast as they could, and they're just exhausted when they get to the top of the hill. And so the Romans attacking them are able to easily push them back. And so they're kind of shocked at how quickly they were able to push them back, so they get the rest of the soldiers saying, no, come on, we're going to keep pushing, and push them all the way back. And so they start pushing them back. And so now the Romans come down off the hill, and now they're charging at the Gauls. And a bunch of the Gauls scattered. So some Gauls running off, who knows. But it turns out not all the Gauls charged up the hill. There's like half the army charged up the hill, and the other half the army was still just down there. And the other half is still enough that whatever the Romans have, they outnumber the Romans. Or I guess a bunch of these guys decided to turn around and come back and join it. But however it happened down in the valley, now it kind of sucked Romans off the hill, and now they're outnumbered down here in the valley. And so what they end up deciding to do is really quickly, the plebeian consul here leading it, he takes his center troops and he has them organized into a wedge formation like that, while the other guys are just holding the line, and charge like that, breaking through the center of their line to separate the Gauls from each other. That way the Gauls that actually get separated from each other, they're going to feel like they're being overrun. They can't see from a bird's eye view that they're still winning. All they know is that there's Romans to both sides of them. So they start scattering, which creates a rout. So they break through, getting the Gauls to rout, and then they end up getting a good victory here. Gauls attack routed, Rome wedge, victory. Okay, so he gets that. And now the pleb, he goes back. The Senate decides not to be so petty this time, and they say, yep, that was pretty impressive. We'll give you your triumph this time. But in the fighting, the pleb consul, as he was leading this wedge, he got himself injured. And so he's seriously injured. And so he can't oversee the upcoming elections. The patrician, pleb, he's very ill still. And so he can't oversee the upcoming elections. And so the only way to solve this problem is to appoint a dictator to oversee the elections. And that dictator decides to abuse his power and make sure that two patricians are once again elected. So got two patrician consuls again. Next year, or some years forward, I think it's next year. The Greeks, we're not sure which Greeks this was. Potentially Greeks from Syracuse, down on island at the end of Italy. Sicily, thank you. Main city right there down on Sicily. That's who Livy speculated it was, but we're not positive which Greeks. They start attacking the coastline along Rome, acting kind of like raiding parties. Now, the Greeks have great fleets. The Romans don't really have much of a fleet at all. And so, not really much they can do about that. And at the same time, the Gauls, what was left of that army, comes back to the Alban Hills, decides to start raiding. Teeny army compared to what they were before. They suffered massive defeats. So, not too worried about this. The Greeks over here, that's more concerning. And what's more important out of all these things is the Latins decide that they are done supplying troops to the Romans. They're done giving troops to Roman armies. They say that we are going to have our own armies. And yes, our army can come with you, but it's not you at the head of our armies anymore. It's us at the head of our armies, and we're going to go join you in the fighting. And on top of that, we get to keep our armies year-round. No more waiting for Rome to come and help us in case the Gauls come invading through our territory. We get to defend ourselves, organize our own armies, go do our own fighting. We're done answering to you in this way. Now, the Latins at this time are pretty much making up half the Roman army. The Romans, they really don't want to offend the Latins, yes, and they don't really feel like they have a good leveraging, any leverage on the Latins at this point. They feel like the Latins have all the leverage, and so they feel like they can't really tell them no. Because if the Latins did leave them and decide to go to war against Rome, the Latins themselves against Rome is already a pretty hard struggle, not to mention everyone else around Rome at the time that they're fighting. So Rome is worried about that, doesn't really know what to do. What they decide to do, even though they've got, all they have is Greeks raiding the coastline, don't really need a huge army for that. And they've got some Gauls going through central Italy, don't really need a huge army for that. They decide to levy as big an army as they possibly can out of their population. So they're getting 10 legions of 4,000 men. They put together 40,000 men, bringing anyone and everyone they could throw together in this army. And they're going to take this army to go deal with the Greeks and to go deal with the Gauls. Massive overkill. All they are trying to do is demonstrate to those Latins, we do not need you to fill our armies. And we have enough people to fill an army like this. So, completely putting on a show for the Latins, trying to scare the Latins into not being so insolent. So, that's what they're doing. One of the two consuls, he dies before the army even leaves. So, it's all coming under just one consul. Lucius Furius Camillus, the Camillus' grandson that we know and love. So, hopefully you all remember Camillus, one of our bigger names. So it's his grandson leading this army, and he goes and he only takes 2 of the legions, so just 8,000 men, and he's going to go deal with the Gauls. He sends the other 32,000 men with the praetor. Remember, a praetor can lead an army. Typically, their job was to stay back in Rome and help with the defenses there, just in case. But since we need him in 2 places, use a praetor. He's going to lead the majority of the army against the Greeks. Now, they're not really going to be able to fight the Greeks. All they're going to do is be able to post people all along the coast, and anywhere the Greeks show up, quickly attack them, and then the Greeks will try to attack them somewhere else.
This is all just boat warfare. They just land.
Coastal raiding, yeah. So they can't go out and fight them on the boats. And anytime the Greeks come on the land, they're completely outnumbered by the Romans. And so it's kind of just a stalemate down the coast until the Greeks eventually give up and go away. So it doesn't really amount to anything. And so Camillus, he goes and he takes his men, and this time they have the actual advantage in numbers against the Gauls. But one of the Gauls comes to the Roman camp, and he wants to challenge them once again to single combat, the way the Gauls know and love.
Goliath.
Yeah, Goliath, that Gaul. Another man, whose name will become as famous as our careful thinker, Titus Manlius, is Marcus Valerius Corvus. Now, Corvus isn't part of his name yet. He's about to earn that. And we'll see how he gets it. So, he decides that he wants to accept the challenge and fight this Gaul in single combat. He goes, he asks the consul, hey, can I be the one to go fight this Gaul? And the consul says, sure, yeah, have at it. And so he goes out to face the Gaul. And in the fight, or as he's walking to the fight, a crow lands on his helmet. Corvus somehow means crow. So that's where he's going to get this Corvus name. Now, that's a very good omen. You like it when the birds come to you. And so, as he goes to fight the Gaul, the crow flies off of his helmet into the face of the Gaul and then away. And the crow flying into the face of the Gaul is enough of a distraction, whatever, for the Gaul, for him to get his kill stroke on the Gaul. And so he kills the big bad Gaul. Now, the Gauls are kind of furious watching this happen, because they kind of feel like he got cheated. It wasn't really somehow a fair fight. And so they don't want him to be able to get any of the plunder off the Gaul's body. Remember, the Gauls, your elite Gauls, are going to have tons of wealth. Bottom Gauls, almost nothing. Top Gauls, going to be pretty wealthy, have some nice items, have some nice armor. They don't want him to raid anything off of the body. So after he wins, Gauls try getting the body back before he can get anything off of it. And the Romans there say, no, that's not fair, that's his spoil. And so they start a tussle. And the tussle grows and grows and grows into a full-fledged, now we're at war, fighting each other. And breaks out in that fighting, and the Romans win the fighting, and so, hooray for the Romans. Anyways, Corvus somehow tied to Crow, and so now he's Marcus Valerius Corvus. He's rewarded with 10 oxen and a golden crown. And then after Camillus wins against the Gauls, he goes and he joins up to help deal with whatever Greeks are on the coast. Nothing significant. Following year, back to a pleb and a patrician being elected consul. One of them being Corvus. Now at the time, Corvus is only 23 years old. And so this is very shocking. Typically, you have to serve 10 years of military service before you're even open to an office. And so him becoming a consul at that age, this is unprecedented. So, very young, he gets elected to the consul. So he's an early rising star there in Rome for being a great soldier. Same year, a treaty is created between Rome and Carthage. Now, Carthage, not even close to Rome right now, but they are in Sicily. Carthage is one of, I just lost them, the Greeks we were just talking about. Syracuse. I keep going to say Sicily. Once I get one, I can't say the other. One of Syracuse's main rivals on the island. And so it could be that somehow that's tied to the Greeks, not sure there. But anyways, Rome and Carthage now entering some sort of non-aggressive pact alliance, maybe something against the Greeks, I don't know. And then we have relative peace at home and abroad for a few years. The only thing of note that happens in that time is, once again, since debt is starting to become a problem again, they pass a new law that the max interest you can now charge on a loan is 6%. One of the reasons that they have to pass that law is because, remember, that as things are getting out of hand, the state is taking over the loans. The state is becoming broke trying to pay for these loans. And so the Roman treasury is becoming broke as they're buying poor plebs' loans. So that's one of the motivations there. Going to quickly go through the subjugating of the Volsci and the Arunci, but understand that this whole time, for the next however many years we have here, 5 years, there's constant minor skirmishes going on between the Volsci, the Arunci, and the Romans. Now, I don't know, have we talked about the Arunci in a bit? Here's our better map. So the Volsci are right here, right? Just south of Rome. There's Rome. The Arunci, they're down here. And they're good friends with the Volsci. So they're both going to be coming together and attacking against the Romans. So a bunch of small skirmishes now going between Volsci and the Romans and the Arunci and the Romans over these periods. We're just going to briefly talk about the major battles going on. Now remember, Antium was a Volsci town. Still a bunch of Volsci by their culture and whatever. And so anytime the Volsci decide to attack Rome, first thing they need is Antium to revolt back to them. And that's going to be the place that they launch their attacks from. They used to use Satricum, more inland, to launch their attacks from it. But remember, the Latins last time, when they got angry at Antium, went and burned it to the ground as they went back before they got destroyed. So Satricum's not there, but it sure would be nice if it was there for Antium. So Antium decides, well, let's put it there. So Antium rebuilt Satricum, so that they got that place inland. And now the Volsci are mobilizing up north, with Antium being a supporter of them, but not technically rebelling against Rome yet. So everyone knows they're helping. Rome doesn't want to start the fight before they have to. And so there's raids going on, Volsci into Roman territory, with Antium somewhat being a supporter of this and just being understood. 3 years later, Antium's now full-fledged rebellion. Rome, we're against you now. We're siding with our friends, the Volsci. And they try to get the Latins to rebel against them as well, because if they got the Latins, that's almost a sure thing. All of them together could probably take on the Romans right now. Now, Romans, they end up marching out there. The Latins don't join them. They beat them in the field. They once again take Satricum. And in the process, they captured a bunch of slaves, in particular 4,000 slaves, which was very fortunate for them because they need money. And so they sell all those slaves to refill the Roman treasury to help deal with the problem that they're having to pay for the plebs' loans. So that turned out to be pretty fortunate for them that they went to war that way and got those slaves. This was the big battle that kind of put an end to the Volsci army from the Roman perspective. Here on out, whatever the Volsci have, it's just going to be small raiding parties. The Arunci participated with the Volsci in this big battle. The Arunci, go back to the other map, being down here. And so after Rome came out, pretty much beat the Volsci, their united army, everything that they had, including some Arunci, the next year they go all the way down into the Arunci territory. They get the Arunci to come out, they win a decisive victory against them, and they now subjugate the Arunci lands. And they say, now this is our lands too. Thanks for playing. And so when we get to 343 BC, Rome now has all the Volsci territory, all the Latin territory, all the Hernici territory, and all the Arunci territory. They're all now subjugated to Rome. They are now considered part of Rome's borders. If you were to construct a map at this time, you would include them as part of Rome. Any fighting that they do from here on out will be seen as them rebelling against Rome, not them as a separate state fighting against Rome. So Rome has now subjugated the area. Rome is now a regional power. They're no longer just little Roman city-state. And so, whole new world for the Romans. Getting them finally subjugated, back on top, finally recovered, and then some from Gauls sacking Rome. Giving you a picture of the map. I don't know why they're including this. The Roman territory should end right here. Sora is one of their most right-hand cities. But now, the Arunci territory, everything in purple, should be part of Rome. So Rome all the way up here, up against the Flarii territory, coming all the way down into here. And including that purple all the way down against Campania down right here. And then you got the Samnites right there, who is what we're going to be talking about next. War with the Samnites. So, any questions before we talk about the Samnites?
Have we ever been at war with or battled the Samnites before?
No. We've only heard about the Samnites a couple times. One of the places we heard about them is, so in yellow here, that's Campania. Campania was initially Etruscan land. And what ended up happening is the Samnites came and helped conquer some of that territory. And now it's been a back and forth. So Campania and the Samnites have been fighting each other for several decades now. In particular, we heard about the city of Cumae. Cumae used to be a Greek city, and now that's under Campania's control. So that's where we've heard about Campania before. I can't remember the year that they created their treaty with the Samnites. 352 or something like that, so 9 years ago that they created that treaty. And in that time, Rome has really expanded towards the Samnites. So Samnites very aware of the Romans, Romans very aware of the Samnites, and there's very much this growing understanding that eventually we're going to come to conflict. And only one of us is going to be the masters of Central Italy. And so that conflict is being seen as more and more inevitable, and it's definitely on the rise. Anything else before we get into the Samnites? Okay, so now, just going to do a quick recap of what we know about the Samnites, because unfortunately it's not much. But you can kind of think about the Samnites as being a hybrid of the Gauls and the Romans. It's like you take the Roman military structure and combine it with the Gauls' way of life, and you kind of get the Samnites. So, story of where the Samnites came from. We're not positive where they came from, but it's most likely that they were offshoots of the Sabines. The Sabines going all the way back. Sabines, let's see. So, Sabini is what that says right there. Sabines up in that territory. Rome's early enemies. The Sabines, they had this process of Ver Sacrum. And this would be once every, I can't remember how often, but like once every 20 years, you consecrate everything that's produced in that year to the gods. This includes any people born in that year. And so how do you actually consecrate the people born in that year to the gods? After, I can't remember how long, but like 20 years when they're adults, they are sent south to go set up colonies and live however they're told to live. I don't know. And so it's thought that through these rituals that the Samnites were doing, that the Sabines were doing, that they came down into this territory and ended up setting up the Samnites. So that's what's thought to be their origins. Now, how are the Samnites organized? They are a tribal federation between 4 tribes. The Herpini, the Caudini, the Carcerani, and the Pentri. I don't know. Those are the 4 tribes organized together in this federation. The tribes pretty much control everything themselves, all internally. There isn't a lot of overlap in terms of how government works from tribe to tribe, except when it comes to their military. So they're organized, they have a federal military, everyone has to contribute to that military, someone's appointed to be the head. And so when it comes to military, they're very organized. Outside of that, they're their own tribes, do their own things internally. The economic policy of this tribe has nothing to do with the economic policy of that tribe, as an example. Do what you want. When it comes to war, we're together. Now, these are very hardened hill people. Work very hard, hardened hill people. And one of the ways that they make most of their wealth is plundering around the coast, because they're surrounded by coastal peoples. And the coastal peoples are going to be wealthy, soft peoples who make their money off of trading. These are hard people who work hard for a living. And so one of the ways that they get wealth, they're just plundering around them all the time, in particularly Campania. That's why they've been having the conflicts with Campania for several decades now. So that's one of the ways that they make some money, is plundering the softer coastal people. They're the hardened hill people. And they were great warriors. I give you a sense of how great of warriors they were. There were rumors at the time that they must somehow be offshoots of Sparta. And I thought that that somehow must be rationalized because of how great of warriors they are. Now, that's most likely not the case, but it's what some contemporaries thought at the time, that the Samnites were somehow descendants from the Spartans. So it gives you a sense for it. Their internal economy, so they raid externally, and, well, another way that they raid is, right, you have a coastal town over here, and you have a coastal town over here. A lot of trade is going to be going on over here. A lot of trade is going to be going on over here. Naturally, these guys are going to want to trade with each other. And so a bunch of the trade routes that they would use through the mountains, the Apennine Mountains run down right here, so this is very mountainous territory that the Sabines are in. A bunch of those mountain passes the Sabines control, and so they're able to also get plunder or charge tribute that way. So the fact that they have wealthy neighbors is one of the things contributing to their wealth. Internally, how do they produce wealth? They produce wealth internally through agriculture, and then in a pastoral way. They have their herds of animals, and they take them one place in the summer, another place in the winter, so they'll spend a lot of time moving back and forth going with the herds. But then agriculture like crazy. One of the things that makes them very interesting is, even though this is very mountainous terrain, all the valleys that you find in between the mountains are extremely fertile. And so they are able to grow a ton of food inside that space. And so even though they don't have big urban centers, like Rome is a big urban center. Rome has a bunch of these cities that are big urban centers. They don't have very many big urban centers, big cities. They are still extremely densely populated. So there are tons of small villages and small hill forts all over the place, scattered all through Samnium here. And why are they separate villages? Because of the natural landscape between them. Like if it was a big flat place and you had a village here, village here, village here, village here, it'd be very natural for those villages over time to combine to form one city. Unless, of course, there's a big mountain right there and whatever right there, splitting them up. And so they're all these divided, very small villages, but they're all packed together because the land is just so fertile that they're able to grow enough to supply themselves. So hill people, even though there's not very many big population centers in terms of one place, densely populated, and so their population is easily comparable to that of Rome's, if not bigger. So hill people, hard people, but tons of them, and very good agriculture in the area.
And good warriors, but they're not as organized as Roman.
They're not as organized with their political structures. Yes, they only come together for war. That's it. And then, they've constantly been at war with their neighbors. All their neighbors know who the Samnites are. They're the ones that come raiding and take our stuff. So they've had conflicts with the Volsci, with the Gauls, with Campania, and with the Greeks. They're fighting everyone surrounding them. Haven't yet had any conflicts with the Romans. Get a little bit into their actual military. So where they shine is their infantry. Now they had 2 tiers of infantry depending on their wealth. They're going to be very similar to the Romans where you have to supply your own equipment if you're going to be a soldier. So you have to supply your own equipment depending on how wealthy you are, depends on the quality of the equipment you can provide. And so they split up their better armed guys and their worse armed guys, but pretty much have to provide the same basic things to arm themselves. Now their infantry are going to be extremely lightly armored. We'll go over their armor, but they're going to be lightly armored compared to the Romans. Remember what the Romans are using right now? Their main way of fighting is a phalanx. So their soldiers are going to be hoplite soldiers. Your hoplite soldiers, they wear very heavy armor, in particular big heavy shields.
Which works great on a field.
Which works great on a big flat field. And they're organized into big blocks of men with just tons of spears coming forward, and you just ram forward into the other guys. Now, the problem that you have when you're in a phalanx is, say you're coming forward, and there's a rock in your path right there. And so your phalanx needs to go around that rock. Now, it is very hard for the guy at this end to know he needs to move that way over, so that this guy, when he gets there, knows that he can move over. And so a phalanx is very hard to maneuver, and it's not very mobile. Even before the soldiers actually deploy into their formations. Even when they're just holding up the spears and marching, when rocks show up and things like that show up, it is very hard for them to maneuver around, because they're very massive units. What the Samnites do is they organize into small blocks of self-contained groups of just 100 men. And they're going to march with like a checker pattern like this. With these individual groups that know how to operate themselves with their own little head, who can give them individual orders. And so when they come across a rock like this one just moves over into that space and they just keep going forward. And then it pops back out. And when it comes time to meet the line, these guys fill in the gaps and you have a solid line. So they know how to fight in hilly terrain, turns out. And they're really good at it. So when I say that they're light and mobile, I mean they're light as in they're lightly armored, so they're going to be quick. But on top of that, they're very mobile in the sense that they can maneuver very well on a battlefield and do whatever they need to do. These phalanx formations have an extremely difficult time doing that. They're big, solid, unwieldy things that kill in one direction. These very maneuverable. Maybe that's a better word for it. Maneuverable. You can do the maneuvers you need to do. So they're organized into smaller, independent formations. When the Romans see this, they're going to love it and eventually adopt it. We'll go over that when the Romans actually adopt it. For now, just give you a high-level view of it. Their actual arming. So what they would particularly use is a spear and then a few javelins. They typically are raiding parties, skirmishing really quickly with some people to get their stuff and take it and leave. So they need to be quick. So they're going to throw their javelins, and then potentially it comes to using an actual spear to fight if the javelins aren't enough to chase them off. The shields that they use, while they're these big shields, they're going to be pretty much wooden shields wrapped with leather. Those shields aren't meant to go head-to-head against a phalanx. Those shields are meant to protect me from projectiles while I throw my projectiles at you. So, light shields that they can move quickly with. Greave, the richer ones can afford 2. But a bunch of them just wear 1 greave. Because when you get there and you line up, you step forward with the leg that you need protected and hold your shield like that. This leg's perfectly fine, perfectly safe. That's just weighing you down. Who needs 2 when 1 will do? And then almost no armor here because that's where their actual shield is going to be protecting them. Typically a plate on the front, plate on the back, and then bronze belts for your more elites. If they got a bronze belt on, that's how you know he's a rich guy. He's doing well. And then helmet. So that's largely the way that they arm themselves, very lightly armored compared to the Romans, and very maneuverable, meant to be fighting in hills, because that's where they fight. That's what they do. Their cavalry, here's where the Romans are going to absolutely embarrass them. Their cavalry is kind of a joke. Now it's kind of shocking that they have cavalry at all, because they're up in the hills, but it turns out that they have enough fertile land that they can actually raise horses, and they're actually pretty good horseback riders. But the only thing they use their horseback riders for is to throw javelins. So their horseback riders just have javelins, and they run and just use hit and run tactics and run away. They're not going to be doing things like using cavalry to break through enemy lines or using cavalry to go behind and slam into the back of an army and win battles that way. They're just going to use throw javelins and run away and harass, hit and run. So no heavy cavalry. So that gives you a sense for the Samnites, the Samnite army, and what they're about. So Rome entering the scene now, one of the major powers. Our 5 major powers now in Italy are going to be the Romans, the Samnites, the Etruscans, the Gauls, and the Greeks. These are the names that you're going to know now, need to know now. Not so important, the Volsci, the Aequii, whoever it was before. So here's our big players. Here's who Rome is now competing with on the world stage. This picture of Rome, their territory should end like right there. It's including Campania. Rome does not have Campania. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, so that mass including that, not sure why. Give you high-level overview of each of these 5 powers, just to briefly give you a sense for where they're all at. So when I give you one of their names, you have a basic idea of what they're like. So here we're listing out the different powers, and then just in some different categories, just to give you a sense of them. So Romans, Samnites, Etruscans, Gauls, and then the Greek city-states. So when it comes to their cohesion, Romans are going to be extremely cohesive. Everything that comes into Rome, that's part of Rome. They're never letting it go. And they're even spreading their citizenship out to at least one city so far. The Samnites, somewhat cohesive, not so much. Etruscans, you can't even hardly get them together to come fight the Romans now. They just are getting weaker and weaker as time goes on, becoming less and less cohesive. Gauls, they'll fight internally amongst each other. Greek city-states, fiercely independent. They'll only work together when they absolutely have to. In terms of wealth, Romans, they're going to be one of your wealthier people there in Italy. Them and the Etruscans are both pretty high on the wealth end. Samnites, they're getting some wealth because they're doing their raiding, but they largely just rely upon agriculture to make their living, so not going to be very wealthy. The Gauls are the poorest of all, and the Greek city-states are just stupid rich. That's all the Greek city-states do, is go and become excellent traders and make tons of money. When it comes to manpower, the Romans and the Samnites are going to have the most people to call upon. So they're going to be your highest populations inside of Italy. The Etruscans, they got some decent populations. The Gauls, now the Gauls technically, they have the most people of all of them, but they'll never organize that many people into an army. And so you can't ever actually bring very many Gauls together. So when you talk about how many they can bring together and put onto a field, it's not going to be much. And the Greeks, it's not going to be much too. And that's because the Greeks have to pay all theirs. Theirs are going to be mercenaries. And so they are done fighting for themselves. They're going to hire other people to come do their fighting for them. So when it comes to their military quality, Romans, they're going to be excellent, in particular for their discipline. The Samnites, they're going to be excellent, in particular for their mobility. The Etruscans, they're on the decline. They're still good. They're still using the phalanx formation, but not nearly as disciplined as they were in the past. Gauls, extremely fierce, but very disorganized. Don't come prepared. And then Greek city-states, good, but it's mercenaries. And worst comes to worst, you can typically pay them off. Political stability, Rome, incredibly strong. Anytime problems come up, they just keep adapting to deal with the problem. For the Samnites, they're just a bunch of individual tribes, so moderately come together for their military, but still individual tribes. Etruscans, very weak, hardly bound together at all, except for religious purposes. The Gauls, very weak, and the Greek city-states, they're completely unstable. You never know when they're going to have a revolution and overthrow their entire government, and new government comes forward. So that gives you a sense, don't care about last category, that gives you a sense for each of the 5 Roman powers, what they're like, and so give you an idea for who we're talking about when we're fighting who. Any questions on any of the 5 powers? Okay, so now we can jump into and hopefully get to the First Samnite War. So remember this map's line. Rome ends at this river, and then this purple is part of Rome. So that's Rome. Okay, how does the First Samnite War break out? Well, it starts out with the Samnites, and over here, this is the land of the Sidini, or the Sidencini. So the Sidencini, they have a city here, Tianum, that's an N, Tianum, and this city happens to be on one of those important roads that go through the Appalachian Mountains and control trade between the two seas there, going up to the Adriatic. Anyways, the Samnites say, that's a wonderful town. I want that town. I'm going to take that town. And so they decide to go to war against the Sidencini. So Samnites, green, attacking blue Sidencini. Now, the Sidencini are very old allies of the Campanians, yellow guys. And so when they get word that the Samnites are invading the Sidencini ask their friends, the Campanians, will you please join us in this war effort against the Samnites? And the Campanians say, yes, we will join you in the war effort. Now, they were kind of hoping that just by them agreeing to the war effort would be enough to stop the Samnites from invading. They were very wrong. The Samnites invaded anyways. So the Samnites invade the territory. Since Campania agreed to participate in this war, now what choice do they have but to go help their ally? So they go and they send their army. They have a fight in the field. Surprise, surprise, the Samnites win. Now when the Samnites realize that the Campanians sent an army against them, they say, yay, now we have an excuse to go to war against them. And they completely ignore Sid and Sinis, and they decide that they're going to put all their war efforts on Campania, in particular Capua, arguably the wealthiest city in all of Italy at the time. So they would love to take that city. And part of it is portrayed as the Samnites just pretended to care about the Senesini to try and draw Campania into the war, because technically they had a treaty where they couldn't just go to war with Campania. And so they were successful that way, getting them to go to war. So now they're going to go to war against Campania. In particular, they're going to try taking Capua. There's some mountains here to the north. They go station their army there. Once again, the Campanians bring out an army against the Samnites. Once again, they lose. They run back into their city. And now what are you going to do? Who in all of Italy could possibly help us against the Samnites? Who are you going to call? Rome. And so they sent some guys and book it all the way up to Rome. It was a long run. He pulled it off. I don't really know how long it took. But he goes up to Rome, someone from Capua. So Campanian sends some envoy to Rome. And they say, basically pleading for help. And they give a pretty persuasive argument to the Romans. They say, first of all, I don't know if you know this, Rome, we're rich. We're very rich. And it's because our lands are stupid fertile. Tons and tons of food. They say, if you will become an ally with us, one, you'll never have food problems again. Not to mention the wealth that you'll have access to. How many times has Rome had plagues where they had people die because of it? Not plagues, but famine, and have people die because of it. So they say, those famines you've been having in the past, they'll become a thing in the past. Two, we'll be so grateful to you. We'll be the best allies you've ever had. Way better than all those other guys. Three, look at who's between us. You have the Volsci here and the Arunci who have been recently taken there. If they knew that they had to fight you on two fronts instead of on one front, they'd never dare revolt again. So we can pretty much ensure you have control of all that territory all the way down to where we are. On top of that, Rome, if you don't accept us as an ally, the Samnites are going to win. And they're going to get us. And right now, there's a good balance of power between you and the Samnites. But if the Samnites have control over Campania, that's going to turn the scales of balance in their favor. And they're going to be more powerful than you. So you can't afford to lose us to the Samnites. And on top of that, I know what you're going to say, you Romans who are always worried about is it legal. You're going to say that you have this alliance with the Samnites, and it doesn't allow for you to make this alliance with us. And we've checked the fine print, and technically it's allowed because of this technicality. And so that's what they present before the Romans. Sorry, I should probably make sure I didn't lose anything here. Did that. Technically allowed. Okay. So the Romans, they say, well, that is a very tempting offer. But unfortunately, even though there may be that loophole, we cannot join this war against the Samnites, especially because you kind of initiated this war against the Samnites. And they kind of argued, yeah, we did initiate the war against the Samnites, but the Samnites really, taking Sardinia, was really to get at us. And so it was either fight them with the help of the Sardini, or fight them without the help of the Sardini after the fact, so we were kind of forced to. I was going to say, I see your point, but still, no. But what we will do is we'll send an envoy down to the Samnites, and we will say, please don't attack our friends, the Capuans, the Campanians, whatever, the guys from Campania, and from Capua. The envoys realize that that's hopeless, that's not going to do anything, and they decide, they had a conversation before they ever left, like how far can we go in our negotiating with the Romans. Part of that conversation before they ever left is, it was better to be subjects of the Romans than to be conquered by the Samnites. And so since they can't convince them in any other way, they say, okay, well, we were authorized to surrender all of Campania to you in the case that you refused. And so he said, we officially surrender. And so now,
Rome was given over.
this is Roman territory. That's Rome's. They just surrendered to Rome without a fight. And now Rome has to defend it. You can't just leave your territory undefended. Now they could have refused the surrender. That's a big refusal. It's like someone saying to you, got $1 million here, but you got to kick Bob. You willing to do it? They're willing to kick the Samnites if it means getting all of Campania. And so they quickly send envoys over to the Samnites, saying, whoa, 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 whoa. Here's what happened. We tried to stay out of it, but they surrendered to us. What could we do? So you are no longer fighting Campania, my friend. You are fighting me. So please do not continue trying to take the richest city in Rome. And the Samnites hear that, and they laugh. Say, we'll see who gets Capua. On top of that, the guy negotiating with the Roman, he orders an attack on the lands around Campania right there and then in front of him. Say, plunder as much as you can. Just to add insult to injury. And so the Roman brings back word as what happens. The Romans are furious about that. It was one thing to continue with the war, but to order the attack right there in front of the envoy, that's just rude. And so,
They just broke their contract.
huh?
They just broke their treaty, technically.
Who technically broke the treaty? I mean, I guess technically the Samnites did, but Rome really broke the spirit of the treaty. In either case, it breaks out in war. So now we got our first of the Samnite Wars. I should mention that as this war starts, Livy adds a little note. I should have written out exactly what he said, because it's great. Something to the effect of, now you're getting my filter. Everything that happened prior to this is small potatoes. And now the things that we're doing matter on the world stage. And so the world is now paying attention to what Rome's doing, rather than just her local little neighbors. Something to that effect, but more elegantly put. Okay. Is this one I just did? Yeah, that's one I just did. So, First Samnite War, getting kicked off. We talked about that, rejected. Okay, so we got our consuls. Our two consuls, now, we kind of took a break. This is one of the years where the patricians got 2 patrician consuls. So these are those last 2 patrician consuls from the last time we talked about it. Oh wait, maybe not. I'm not sure if he's a patrician or not. Shouldn't have said that. Anyways, the 2 consuls, here they are, but in particular, Marcus Valerius Corvus, that same Corvus, Mr. Crow. He's now one of the consuls. He's going to go, and Aulus Cornelius, he's going to be the other consul. They're each going to take armies, and they're going to go down and invade into the territory. Probably should have just stuck with the other map. I like it better. Shows the coloring better. Okay, so one of them, the one who isn't Corvus, the one who's not the Crow guy, he's marching into the actual Samnite territory to try and get a decisive victory against them somehow, some way in the Samnite territory. Corvus, our Crow guy, he's dealing with the Samnites wherever they are in Campania. At the time that he arrives with the army, that's somewhere around here near Cumae. So these are where the next 2 battles that we're talking about are going to occur. Can't remember which one occurs first. Corvus. Corvus is first. Okay, so Corvus, he is the type of general, give you a sense for what he is and for how he gets his troops to fight so hard for him. He's one of these generals that if he's on the field, the troops just fight way, way harder for you. He's the type of guy who he participates in all the responsibilities that a soldier has to participate in. When they're digging the trenches, he's right there digging the trenches, and he's going to make sure he's digging faster than the guy next to him. He's a lead by example kind of soldier, or general. He's a soldier general, that's what he is. So he does all the things that the soldiers do, and even talks about how even like wrestling matches that soldiers do to keep their body fit, he goes and he wrestles with the regular soldiers, winning competitions amongst them, just one of the guys, trying to outperform them in all their responsibilities. His attitude is always demand more of yourself than you do of your soldiers. That would be summing up his view of leadership in one sentence. So he is extremely respected and loved by his soldiers. And so here they are facing a new enemy down in Cumae. One of the things you got to do as a general is build up the morale of your soldiers before they go out on that battlefield. And so he gives some big, great speech. The essence of his speech being, I am not one of these consuls who is standing before you because I've got the right blood. I'm a consul standing before you because of my deeds, what I did as a soldier, and how good I am at fighting. And you've seen it for yourself, how I am amongst you. That's the kind of guy you have leading you, and so we're going to be victorious here. Gets his army all riled up, they're ready to go. And so they go, they have the fight at Cumae, they start fighting these Samnites, and these Samnites are a lot tougher than they at first anticipated. And so the fighting is going on and on all day. There's lots of times where one wing's about to give away, but they're able to recover it. There's even a time where Corvus thinks that he has them. He orders a charge of the cavalry to try and break through their lines, and they hold out against the cavalry charge to stop that from even working. And it isn't until nightfall that the Samnites finally give up the fight. And it's arguable that the only reason they gave up the fight at nightfall is because now they can retreat with no fear of being pursued. So, very hard-fought battle here at Cumae, but it was a victory. The Samnites were driven out, got their camp, and the Samnites went back into Samnian territory. Not a lot of Samnites killed. Just long-drawn fighting, probably about the same many dead on both sides, even though Rome technically won. But at least they got the plunder. So that's Corvus. Can't remember our other guy's name. Cornelius. Cornelius, yeah. He's somewhere in Samnite territory, don't know exactly where he is. But he's trying to provoke a fight from the Samnites, and he, not really knowing the territory very well, there's mountains over here, and there's this mountain pass that he brings his army into, so now they're inside the mountain pass here. The problem he has is that the Etruscans are now over here, and the Etruscans have... Samnites. Samnites are over here, Samnites are over here on the high ground, and I think that this is somehow trapped in or something like that. And so when he enters, he realizes his mistake, no way to get out. If he tries going out, he would be attacked on both sides from them attacking downhill, and he'd pretty much be dead. So, the Samnites knew what they were doing. They got him trapped. That was very intentional. Somehow they drew him in there. Don't know exactly how it is that they drew him in there. And the Romans know that they're done for. This is a terrible situation to be in. One of his military tribunes, Publius Decius Mus, so one of his military tribunes, he realizes that there's actually a hill, so this is higher ground, but this is an even higher hill behind these guys. And he says to his consul, he says, let me take some elite troops and go station ourselves up on that hill and build a little fortification up on that hill, sneak up there. And the consul gives him permission to do that, and he's able to sneak a small army up there without these guys noticing. By the time the Samnites notice that they have Romans right here and Romans right here, they realize they're in trouble, because if the Romans come start marching through, and these guys try to turn an attack, now they'll be the ones being attacked on both sides. And so now they're in the exact same position that the Romans are in. And so now they're in trouble. And they start maneuvering, coming up with ideas on what to do. And so the Romans can see their armies kind of move and see them kind of changing their minds. And they're being indecisive. And so the consul says, time to go. And he books it while they're being indecisive. And he gets out of there. So they're safe and they build their Roman camp. These guys, when they came up here, they built a little version of a camp to kind of protect themselves. But they knew that they were pretty much sacrificing themselves to help the big army get away. And so the Samnites, curious about what happened, they bring their whole army over here, so now they got all their army over here. It's kind of coming the end of the day, and so they just kind of put watchmen around the hill to watch them, and they go to sleep. Decius here, he can't believe his eyes. They didn't dig a trench. They didn't put up a barricade around us. They just put a few watchmen and went to sleep like this. He can't believe it. So he sends scouts out, trying to see if there's any good way where you could get past the watch guards, find their path, and they sneak off through the night past the watch guards. Now, unfortunately, there's Samnites are spread all over the place. It's not organized like I've drawn here. And one of the soldiers accidentally knocks a Samnite soldier over onto him while he's sleeping or something like that. It accidentally causes a ruckus. And so the Samnites wake up, some of them. It's going to start creating a panic throughout the Samnite camp as they see Romans. So these guys, they just start booking it through, killing any of the Samnites that get in their way. Now, the Samnites have no clue what's going on here. They just wake up to, there's Romans in the camp. What happened? Did these guys come back and attack us? It can't be these guys because we still have our watch guards there and it would have been known somehow. So they don't know what's happening. By the time they get back to the camp and it's morning, these guys can't believe their eyes. Those Romans made it back. They thought they were done for. It was pretty much understood that they were sacrificing themselves so that the bulk of the army could get away. They can't believe their eyes. And he tells them, Decius here, he tells the consul, we need to turn around and we need to go attack. Because these guys are sending out raiding parties all over the area looking for us, trying to figure out what happened. And they are not organized into an army anymore. And in fact, we think 2 groups are following us right now. And so they turn around as an organized army, and they just systematically destroy them as they come across them. And what's worse is as the Samnites hear whatever ruckus is going on and realize that fight's going on, they all start running back to their camp, which the Romans are already at before them. And so they're just destroying the Samnites as they're all showing up for the fight. So it's an absolute bloodshed for the Samnites, and they end up losing 30,000 men in what was supposed to be a crazy easy victory. It completely changes. And so they decide to give Publius Decius here a nice crown. Now they give him, I think they gave him a gold crown. I told you before that they give the gold crown to people whose actions are seen as saving a legion. I lied. That's not what the gold crown is. Gold crown, I guess, is just a gold crown, and you get it. They gave him a grass crown. Now the grass crown is a symbolic thing where your actions are supposed to have saved an entire army. And so now this is the first time that I know of that one of these crowns are given out. So gold crowns, they have their intrinsic value. They're gold crowns. These grass crowns, it's symbolic value.
So Manlius got a gold crown?
So Manlius got a gold crown, which is just a nice gift.
I see.
And I think Corvus got a gold crown. So I think this is the first time we're seeing one of these grass crowns being handed out. Grass. Like what you imagine Julius Caesar is wearing when you picture him in your head.
Okay.
Like that. Sorry, were you saying something?
That's what I was wondering.
Okay. Yeah, something like
I
that.
thought you might have said brass. But
Oh, no.
coming through.
Grass, made out of plants.
Yeah, I remember.
Not a metallic crown. Okay. Anyways, so what should have been a huge defeat for the Romans turns out to be an absurdly big victory for the Romans. 30,000 Samnites taken out in one go. Incredible. Now, once they win their victory up here, they decide, we're done trying to navigate Samnite lands without knowing the terrain. We're going to go back and meet up with wherever the Roman army is. And so these 2 armies meet up together somewhere around Suecilia, something like that. I can say it however you want since you can't read it. How'd you know? Okay. Anyways, so they meet up there. They want to press their advantage on the fact that they feel like they just beat the Samnite army and invaded to Samnium proper now. And maybe even capture some cities along the way. The Samnites, they're not stupid, even though they just suffered the way that they did. They know what Rome's likely going to do. And remember, Samnites, big population density, and they could organize quickly for military activities. And so they hurry up and raise an army of another 40,000 and meet them there. So both the Romans and the Samnites were basically rushing there as fast as they could once they met up together, trying to be the first one to push the advantage. Samnites stopping from actually getting into Samnium proper, Romans trying to push their advantage. So both of them show up to the battlefield with very little provisions. You just pretty much took what you could haul and you hurried up and you booked it. So both armies being there are very lowly supplied. The Romans beat the Samnites there. They knew that the Samnites were coming, and so they decided to hurry up and set up a camp. And simply because of the geography of the area, they had to set up an unusually small camp. And since they set up an unusually small camp and have their army inside there, when the Samnites show up, they think small camp means small army. And so they think that the Romans have a much smaller army than what the Romans actually have. I don't know how comparable they are in terms of size. But the Samnites, knowing that the Romans had to rush the same way that they had to rush, know that the Romans can't have much supplies the same way that we don't have very many supplies. So we don't have to take the fight to them. We can starve them out. Now, what are we going to do while we're starving them out? We're going to go gather food. So once again, we'll post watches around and make sure that they don't get out. This time we got a chunk of our army here ready to attack. Not going to make the same mistake twice. And sent out a bunch of foraging parties to go foraging all over the place. Once again, Romans standing up on the wall. Can't believe what he's seeing. Half the Samnite army or whatever it is just walking away to go foraging. And so once that happens, they come charging out. A lot bigger army than what was expected. And so enough of the Samnites left that the Romans actually had the numeric advantage. And so they just pressed their advantage, beat the army, and then they scattered. So didn't take as heavy casualties in this, but still, the casualties from up here, 30,000, that's a big number of casualties. So the Romans officially beat them there, drive them out of the Campania lands, and that puts an end to the campaigning season. Rome's got to now go all the way back up to Rome, which is a very long ways away. So they decide that they're going to leave a couple armies. I don't know what a couple armies means, maybe a couple legions, like 2 legions, in the area to occupy some of their bigger cities, in particular Capua, wherever it is on the map. It has different names. Your Capua. I don't know. I just picked one. Okay.
Romans didn't like the name.
I don't know. Okay, so we're still on this slide. Finish.
No.
Oh, I did finish. I just didn't write it on here. So Rome wins, they go back, and they actually end up celebrating 2 separate triumphs, one for each consul. Each consul gets his own triumph. What they did is considered so great. Word spreads about Rome's victory here. I don't think I wrote it down, but even Carthage getting word about it, they sent, I want to say it was 20 pounds or 25 pound gold crown to Rome to be dedicated to the temple of Jupiter, recognizing the great victory that the Romans had just won over the Samnites. So the Romans now making a name for themselves on the world stage. 2 of the big boys in Italy just went at it, and Rome came out the clear victor, even though the war's not over. So next year, after Rome just had these crazy victories, Flarii, they've been just in a truce to not attack each other with the Romans. Once they get word, they say, we're allies. We're good. So Flarii up there in Etruscan, they're now a Roman ally. Oh, I didn't mention it. Carthage sent a gold crown to honor Jupiter. Didn't say how big it was. I want to say it was 20, 25 pounds, something like that. Roman victory, 2 triumphs. Okay, I just had on the next slide. It was just the previous year that happened. Okay. Anyways, a couple armies garrisoned in Campania, in particular in the city of Capua. Now, these armies are now in ridiculously fertile territory, and these are soldiers who have just been fighting to protect all this territory. And they start thinking to themselves, if I fight to protect something, don't I kind of deserve it? And the soldiers start talking amongst themselves and saying to themselves, what do we have to look forward to when this is all said and done? We're going to have some land given to us back at Rome, some hard land, rocks that you have to get out of the field. It's hard to work. Look at the land right here that these guys have. These soft, weak people that we have to protect. Why don't we just take it? It could be ours. So the soldiers are debating a mutiny and just taking Campania, the armies that they have there, for themselves. And we'll set ourselves up as an individual state. We'll be an ally of Rome, and this will be our land. Things could be nice. So that's what they're debating doing. The new consul for the year back at Rome, word spreads that this kind of conversation is going on with these armies. And so he's afraid of how quickly they'll act. So he quickly sends word to the armies that you're not going to be there for 1 year, you're going to be there for 2 years. Stationed there for 2 years. He wants them to think that they have a whole other year to plan the mutiny so that they'll drag their feet and not do anything. In the meantime, he starts very gradually saying, a handful of soldiers from here, we need to move you here. A couple of you, we need to move you here. And he starts identifying who are basically the ringleaders of this mutiny going on and slowly drawing them away from the army. Eventually, it gets to the point that the army starts catching on. Someone spilled the beans. They very much know that we plan to mutiny against them. And now they're going to slowly recall us and bring trial against us one at a time. And we are going to be punished in a horrendous way. So it's now or never. So they choose now. And so the army mutinies against Rome. Now the army mutinies against Rome, and they gather together and they're going to go marching on Rome to try and negotiate. We get Campania, and this is what's going to happen. They realize they don't really want to fight against Romans without a good leader. The problem that they have is they recognize none of us in the army are really great generals. Now there was a known great general. His name was Titus Quintus, he was a good consul a few years ago. He got injured. He's now lame. And he went off to some farm over in the Tusculan territory to live the rest of his life. Older guy. What they decide to do is send some guys to his house in the night, pull him out of bed, say, come with us or we're going to kill you. He gets hauled off to the army, brought to their camp, and told, you're our general now. Says, okay, I'm your general now. And so he's going to be the one to lead them, and they tell him what their plan is, and he says, okay, that's your plan. Let's go to Rome. And so they start marching to Rome. Now, Rome, knowing that a Roman army is coming and marching on them, and they already had an idea that there was a conversation about this mutiny, they're not completely taken off guard, they decide to appoint Corvus dictator. Now, the reason that they're appointing Corvus dictator is, yeah, he is loved by the soldiers. The soldiers absolutely love this guy. This guy loves his army. And so, when the army shows up, he comes with his army, he goes to address his soldiers directly. And he tells them that that's what they are. You are not my enemy, you are my soldiers. I am your consul. Remember those victories I led for you. Gives them one of those, which of you has done more for me than I've done for you type talks. Which of you has worked harder than me when it came to the war? So he makes them feel very small, and lets them know that he considers them his army, and he is not going to attack them unless they force him to attack them. He says something to the effect, got one of his quotes, you shall raise your arms against me before I shall raise my arms against you. So you're going to have to strike first here. So you're not my enemy, you're my army. And then Quintus turns to him and says, please guys, listen to him. Corvus, when he finds out that Quintus was the one leading him, he pretty much puts together, you don't want to be here. He tells him, if it's going to come to blows, because I have so much respect for what you did, because he's a well-known name, well-known general, he says, make sure you station yourself in the rear. In case it comes to fighting, because I don't want you to die because of this. But with that, he gets the army to feel bad enough about themselves that they decide that they're not going to fight, but they tell him that you have to achieve some sort of clemency for us. Because we planned this mutiny, they're going to kill us, you got to work with us. And Corvus agrees that he'll work with them. So he goes back to the Senate and he gets clemency for all the soldiers, and so none of the soldiers are going to get punished for their mutiny.
What's clemency?
Forgiveness?
Yeah, basically forgiveness. Get it pardoned.
Yes.
There you go. So they all get a pardon, and so none of them are going to be punished for their mutiny.
Better than fireflighting, kind of.
Huh?
Better that they do that than fireflighting.
Right, fighting, they would just get killed. Not enough of an army to hold out. So on top of that, with what Corvus did here, he steps down from his dictatorship, but the way it's presented is it kind of gets a plebeian pendulum swinging in the plebeians' favor in terms of the power for the plebs. So this is seen as a nice win for the plebs. So the following year, they get a bunch of legislation blocked to help them out. So, did I say blocked? A bunch of legislation passed to help them out. Now, first thing that they get passed is no more interest. You can no longer charge interest on loans. Now, even though they get that written down as a law, this becomes a law that literally nobody listens to and is never enforced. Because it's just a broken law. It can't ever work. If you get rid of interest, there's no reason for someone to get out loans. Give out a loan. And loans are a huge part of like a farmer's economy. It is not uncommon that early in the season they get a loan because they need if I got more land, I need some loans so I have more equipment, more seed, whatever, to plant whatever I need. And I expect to easily be able to pay back the loan when I get the harvest. So that's a very normal transaction that occurs all the time in Rome. So everyone's okay with that law being ignored. But it becomes technically a law. Another one, which is a big one, I didn't even know that this was possible until I read this, but apparently people had been holding multiple offices in the state. So you could be a military tribune while also being whatever else, while being a tribune of the plebs or whatever. So they passed a second law saying that each person can only hold a single office at a time. You can't hold multiple positions. And now a third law is that there has to be a 10-year gap between consecutive offices. In particular, where this matters the most is a consul. Once a patrician is a consul, they have to wait 10 years before they can run to be a consul again. So prior to this, it was just that you couldn't do it in back-to-back years. And really what it was is you couldn't oversee your own elections, was the way it was technically worded. But now you actually have to wait a 10-year gap before you hold consecutive offices. Huge. They're worried about people becoming too powerful in the state and getting too much power to themselves. So people abusing their power by holding multiple positions, and people running for the same office over and over again, abusing the position. And then finally, they say, this time it's a law, and a real law that you can't change just by voting different, that one pleb is a consul every time. No more of this, well, if it votes different this time, then that doesn't count. So laws about elections are special, and you can't just vote however you want and elect however you want.
They put the exact same law back.
They put the same law back in place, but now it's understood that laws about elections can't be overturned in elections. So that makes this work, and now it's also going to make this work. And it's also going to come back to the plebs, because remember, the plebs over and over again like electing the same tribune of the plebs over and over again. So now that's going to be blocked. Final year of the Samnite War. Consular army is sent into Samnium just to cause havoc, do whatever. And the other one is sent to deal with Antium tries to revolt again, and they're quickly put down. So 2 consular armies, one sent to deal with Antium revolting, that's quickly taken care of. One sent into, another one sent into the Samnite territory to just cause havoc. With this, the Samnites decide it's time to sue for peace again. They don't want to fight another Roman army. So they send envoys to Rome suing for peace. They remind Rome that unlike everyone else here, we became friends with you when we were not at war with each other, not under any sort of threat, but under a sort of common friendship. And this all broke out because of stupid Sidini bringing in the Campanians. I mean, this was just nonsense that happened to begin with. So let's just go back to being friends like we were before. And Rome says, yep, that's a good idea. Let's go back to being friends. Now the Samnites say, Rome, we are going to continue our war against the Sidoncini. I think I keep saying the Sidini. It's the Sidoncini. We're going to continue our war. They're located right there wherever they're located. I don't really like that map because it doesn't show them well. Please agree as part of this treaty to stay out of that war so that we don't evolve into going to war with each other again. And so Rome promises we will not get involved in that war in any way, shape, or form. And they say, great. Now the Sidoncinians, as they're getting conquered by the Samnites, they say, Rome, they send an envoy to Rome and they try, we surrender to you, just like the Campanians did. And Rome says, nice try, enjoy your Samnite rulers. And so that brings an end to the Samnite Wars. The Samnites largely taking control of the Sidini territory, and the Romans now have control of the Campanian territory. And that's the end of the First Samnite Wars. There's 2 more to come.
Honestly, best solution, just be such great rulers that people just would rather you rule over them than anyone else.
Then the other bad guys?
Yep.
Until there aren't the bad guys. Then they don't want you to rule over them anymore. Yeah, we'll see that happen. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Things will get more exciting now. We're into the Samnite Wars.